Today I plan on talking about Wano and going in depth into Wano and just explaining why Wano is better than people think. But I think I'm kind of Wano'd out for now. No, One Piece is on break this week, obviously. So I felt like, why not talk about different arcs post-Timeskip? Because as much as we love One Piece, I feel like there's a separation between the arcs, between the time periods. I feel like people compare pre-Timeskip to post-Timeskip consistently, and I think it's a bit unfair to post-Timeskip because things are still being fleshed out, considering, you know, the time skip was about, what, 590, 500 or chapter 600, something like that. Pre-Timeskip was a lot longer than post-Timeskip so far. When we look at the arcs pre-Timeskip, I feel like it's just a different journey and a different setup, so they hit a bit differently. Personally, for me, I think some of my favorite arcs are post-Timeskip. Of course, pre-Timeskip has classics like Marineford, Enies Lobby, and even Sabaody. Sabaody is a special case, and even in this video, I won't have it as a part of it because even though it's two parts, pre-Timeskip and post-Timeskip, combined, I think is one of my favorite arcs in One Piece, pre and post. I feel like they're two sides of the same coin, so I don't put those on ranking lists unless it's like an overall. But as far as post, some of my favorite arcs, people have been kind of on the fence as far as like what they like and what they dislike. But today, I'm going to rank my favorite arcs post-Timeskip. Now, before I get into my top 5, I'm going to have some honorable mentions. So I'm going to rank my 5 favorite arcs. We're going to keep it to 5. It's not that many arcs post-Timeskip, but it's enough. So we're going to have some honorable mentions or talk about the arcs that are not in my top 5. And first, let's start with Fishman Island. Fishman Island essentially was one of those arcs that it was after the post-Timeskip, it was after Sabaody, obviously, and we got to Fishman Island and we were expecting a lot, especially, again, post-Timeskip. Straw Hats were away for 2 years. Now let's see what they got. When we got to Fishman Island, we saw what they got, but it wasn't met with a lot of resistance. The thing is, thematically, Oda had a different route in which he was trying to portray that arc, specifically the backstory of Fishman Island, racism, and somehow getting into the bonds within the crew. In a way, Jinbei being a part of that arc is perfect because of what he represents overall for the One Piece story, which is a conversation for another day, just the total impact of Jinbei. But I think based on that, the arc somehow, it feels a bit convoluted. Now, it had some cool moments, I guess, but some of the great moments I think were Straw Hat worthy moments between like Luffy and Jinbei, Zoro and Sanji acknowledging each other. But Fishman Island, even though it was supposed to be one of the deepest or one of the more sentimental arcs in One Piece, it felt somehow empty because I don't think the topics took enough time. For racism and fleshing something like that out, you have to establish a lot. You have to talk about exactly how it got there, process, how you're getting out of this whole system of, I don't know, overall bigotry that the fishmen were going through. It's a deep topic. So I feel like Oda, he touched on it, but based on what it represented and how important this was, it didn't quite hit the same as opposed to some of the previous arcs in One Piece when Oda touched on deep topics. But I don't want to get too deep into Fishman Island because I think philosophically, it's a lot we can get into in regards to that arc, but it's being left off for that simple reason, where I feel like I understand what Oda was trying to do with it and where he was trying to go, but it just didn't impact me the way I thought it would, or honestly, like Oda thought it would. Of course, I'm speaking for me, obviously, but you can leave your thoughts below in regards to how you feel about Fishman Island. Like, what do you like and dislike about it in regards to it and how it holds up to the other One Piece arcs? Quick FYI as well, I will not be including Wano in this top 5 or ranking because Wano essentially is not over yet. I've made a couple videos as far as like how good I feel like the Wano acts have been and overall the Wano arc, and I feel like it's too premature to even rank Wano. I mean, we could rank it, but I don't think it would even be on my list yet because there's a lot to be fleshed out and the things that I really love about Wano, things that I dislike, but for right now I think we have to wait and see because it's a lot to come, because I think we're halfway maybe through the arc, and so to rank it at this point doesn't make any sense. So Wano is not on my list. So with that being said, let's get into my personal top 5 arcs post-Timeskip. So we're gonna go 5 to 1. So number 5, we have Whole Cake Island. Whole Cake Island as an arc is not something I despise at all. I feel like overall it's a good arc. I just feel like it had some shortcomings, and again, some of this bias comes from reading week to week, but overall I think it's a good arc. It gets a bad rep due to the Big Mom stuff and how things kind of played out, but going back to Whole Cake Island and just going through the arc, of course it's a Sanji centric and Sanji focused arc, but it's about so much more than that. It's establishing Big Mom as a Yonko, establishing her family, probably setting up the Big Mom and Kaido stuff for a bit, testing the bonds in the Straw Hat crew, testing seeing Luffy and basically putting him in a position to surpass his limits, introductions to several new characters, deepening the bonds between the Minks and the Straw Hats is somewhat like a precursor to Wano, because a lot of the things that transpired in Whole Cake Island directly affects Wano. Luffy, as a combatant, he needed Whole Cake Island to be able to even stand a chance in Wano, learning what he's learning now. But it's a lot of good moments that I feel like people, of course, you acknowledge them and you recognize them, but it's easy to forget because there's some dull moments as well. For me personally, reading Seducing Woods and going through that moment, it was really rough because I feel like that was the weakest part of the arc, but it was a lot of great moments as well. For me personally, finding out about Sanji's backstory in addition to what we already knew, which is the Zeph stuff, but now knowing exactly what he went through, it deepened my bond or my connection to Sanji as a character, and he catapulted up. Knowing Sanji as a character, somehow it's justified, but this moment or the time he spent with his family changed him. It altered who he is as a character. I mean, I've always meant to make a video on Sanji. Again, I've made my Luffy growth video and my Zoro growth video. Sanji's growth video is next, but I think it's interesting for Sanji as a character how, in a way, I wish Oda would have touched on this between Sanji and Zoro, because he's seen exactly how an obsession with power can destroy someone or somehow lessen their values on life and just the simple things, right? Essentially how Judge was in regards to how he wanted power so bad, he was willing to sacrifice one of his sons because his son wasn't powerful. Of course, I'm not saying Zoro is obsessed to the point that he would sacrifice a Nakama or something like that, but I think Zoro's obsession with power, it would be a cool way to tackle something of that topic, and maybe we have Zoro go too far one time, but I mean, that's a separate conversation altogether. But I feel like Whole Cake Island, fleshing out Sanji and his backstory, introduction to Judge, the Sweet Commanders, Big Mom, the culmination of it, I think left a bad taste in my mouth, because towards the buildup of the entire arc, our whole thing was seeing Sanji have that moment in which Big Mom is overwhelmed by the cake. Of course, the cake worked because Big Mom was blown away by it, but the outcome just wasn't what we expected. And again, that goes back to our expectations, but at the end of the day, as a consumer, as a reader, you go into these things, you want something fulfilling. And I feel like Whole Cake Island, even though the entire arc, one of the main focuses was about food, it wasn't filling, I should say. It was good, but I don't think it impacted me personally the way I would like to, especially with all the themes there. Like okay, so if we go to combat wise, the main fight was of course Luffy versus Katakuri, and that had several questions based on how Luffy fared in that fight. And Sanji, again, I think it's split into separate parts how Sanji is portrayed in this arc. He had a moment in which he had to overcome his family, overcome his emotions against his family, overcome his emotions and how they're impacting the Straw Hats, in particular Luffy, and then come into terms with the fact that you're not the same person anymore and you have to grow from this. And again, you know, the whole raid suit and overcoming his brothers, it's a lot in that arc that makes it better than Consensus to me, but there are also things that you could expect to be better. And it did drag a bit because it's a very long arc, I believe like 78 chapters or something like that, really long arc. So that's why Whole Cake Island for me is number 5. Number 4 on my list, I have Punk Hazard. Punk Hazard is a very underrated arc, and I think in hindsight, when you look at it, it's one of those arcs that it wasn't as impactful when you were reading it, but that had its slow moments as well. Like, god damn, like think about Mocha and that entire thing with them running away from Smiley and then also running away from the kids. It drove you crazy for a while. Some amazing moments in Punk Hazard. First off, Punk Hazard has probably 2 of the best fights in One Piece, in Virgil versus Smoker, as short as it was, and Smoker versus Law. Some of the underratedest fights, but if you go back and watch these fights on YouTube clips or whatever, so freaking good. Also, seeing Law again in that arc, I think Law for me made that arc. He was fantastic. Of course, they were fleshing out Law's connection to the Doflamingo family to set up going to Dressrosa, giving us information about the Smile Fruits and the things Caesar was working on, and somehow is tied to Whole Cake Island as well because they had the gigantification that Big Mom was going after. And we know Caesar's impact on the arcs going forward as well. So Caesar in Whole Cake and in Dressrosa was a major plot point. For me, what carried Punk Hazard was some of the characters. Virgo, I think, was very good in the arc. Getting some hints towards Law's backstory in the arc was really good. And we can't forget the comedy, because the comedy in Punk Hazard, I think, was top tier. We had the Straw Hats, they switched bodies, so their personalities, they're in different bodies, and Sanji being in Nami's body. Some of the best moments, because of course Sanji being somewhat of a pervert, he wants to look at Nami's body, and we know how he reacts to that stuff. So that was, again, top tier. The thing with the arc that I think impacted me as a Doflamingo stan. Towards the end, Doflamingo showed up, right? And we had Doflamingo versus Smoker. We had the Aokiji and Doflamingo moment. And even after that, the whole setup to Dressrosa really built the anticipation of what was to come. The Law and Luffy alliance. As an arc, it was a lot of setup, but we can't forget Law and his speech about like the hands of time, and how he mentioned Doflamingo being complacent and how they were underestimating him and his growth. And we saw it in which he essentially one-shot Virgo, who was, I think, a formidable character, just that in that moment, Law overcame him, and with Law's Devil Fruit, it's pretty damn powerful. So again, Smoker was in that arc, and Smoker is one of my favorite One Piece characters, Law as well. Doflamingo, it was just a cluster bunch of great moments that I really enjoyed. So for me, that's why Punk Hazard. Now, what I'm saying is, objectively, these aren't the 5 best arcs in One Piece. I'm just ranking my 5 favorite arcs in One Piece. Now, if you guys want to chime in and give your thoughts on Punk Hazard as well, just reread it or rewatch it and then let me know if it's the same or does it change for you, because for me it definitely changed. Number 3, we have Dressrosa. Now, a lot of people are going to be surprised because I just mentioned that Doflamingo was my favorite character in One Piece. Yes, he is, but we cannot overlook some of the flaws that Dressrosa had and how it impacted how I enjoyed it. Simply put, Dressrosa was convoluted. It was too long. It had too many characters. It had too many storylines going on, but it had amazing moments, and that catapulted it to number 3 for me, as well as my Doflamingo bias. But okay, so let's start with some of the bad. Obviously, the Tontadas. I think the Tontadas, that storyline, no one cared about it. Personally, I didn't care about it when I was reading it. I felt like it was something that was thrown in there for the sole purpose of having Leo at the end join the Grand Fleet, and it's more than that. I'm not explaining in depth what the Tontadas meant to the story because they had a major impact on the outcome of Dressrosa, but in the moment, it felt like a gimmick. Like even Robin coming across the Tontada and that whole moment with them, and we had moments with Zora and the Tontada. Like they were central figures of the arc in regards to how they were going about things, but you can't help but feel that the arc would have been better if it was shorter and the Tontadas were removed. Like if we didn't have to deal with Leo and Mensheri crying and all that stuff, I think I would have enjoyed Dressrosa a bit more. Now let's get to the Coliseum. Now, as hyped as I was about the Coliseum, because remember, Dressrosa essentially started with Doflamingo putting Ace's Devil Fruit on the block and saying, if you win this tournament, you can get this Devil Fruit. Now, this presented many questions, like, how did you come across this Devil Fruit? Like, would the Straw Hat eat a Devil Fruit? Was Oda going to break one of his rules again and allow Luffy to eat this Devil Fruit? It led to many questions, but the Coliseum was weak. In a tournament like that, where we had a Yonko Commander, we had Luffy, we had, supernovas. When I say supernovas, not supernovas from Luffy's class, but previous supernovas, it was really underwhelming. Like when I think of tournament arcs, there are different moments that you really enjoy. Like one of my favorite moments in the Dressrosa arc was probably Hakuba and how he soloed his entire arc or his entire group, and then they were wondering exactly what happened. I remember that, like that chapter specifically, because after the chapter, everybody was thinking it was Conqueror's Haki, or who is Hakuba? Is Hakuba like somebody else really powerful that we don't know? It was an amazing moment. But going back to some of those best moments in the Coliseum, I don't know, we had Luffy soloing the bull, we had Luffy versus Don Chinjiao. There were okay moments, but compared to like tournament arcs from the past, and again, I'm going back to Naruto and the Chunin exam, some great moments from those things, and bringing My Hero Academia into it, we had some good moments from that tournament arc as well. I just think that for One Piece and what it was, underwhelming as a tournament arc, even though it had some good moments. Now, to the good of Dressrosa. Fujitora. Fujitora shows up, and Fujitora is essentially Smoker, but stronger. But essentially, he was in the vein of Smoker, where he was an honorable guy, but he just had more power to do things. There was a moment even Smoker, after he found out what Fujitora did, just prostrate to the citizens or to the king of Dressrosa, Riku, and how he basically went against Akainu and how he felt about Dressrosa and how he handled the situation. Smoker said, if I had that power, I don't think I could have done the same thing. In a way, Fujitora, they're different. Maybe Fujitora is just a bit more confident, and because he's older, he's been through a lot. You know how old people are, because they've been through so much, they really don't have any filter, they say whatever. Fujitora was that in Dressrosa, but even more than that. You understand his ideals and how he wanted to expose the world government, even though he was a part of it, but he felt like this was a way for him to not only push forward his agenda of abolishing the warlord system, but also to show the Marines, the world government, a mirror and say, This is something that we created, and they essentially were saved by a pirate. How can we improve from this? How do we hold ourselves accountable? And that's what Fujitora did. So that's why he was a fan favorite in that arc. Sabo's reveal, a lot of people expected it. I thought in the anime it was done really well, in the manga as well. If you weren't spoiled, you really enjoyed that moment because there was speculations for a while that Sabo was alive, and it came to fruition in Dressrosa. Now, people had issues with how Sabo was not present at Marineford and the reasons why, and it's amnesia. Amnesia is an easy out for a lot of things sometimes in anime or in fiction in general because you just forgot, you didn't know, and that was essentially the thing. And Sabo remembered everything after Ace died. But Sabo as an Ace replacement, he was serviceable, right? I don't think he replaces the feelings and the emotions that Ace gave you, but it was reassuring to know that Luffy had an older brother back that he could somewhat lean on sometimes, and you saw in Dressrosa him holding off Fujitora. It helped a lot, and it somewhat restored a weird balance in the One Piece world, because we now had someone who was, the older brother of Luffy, and he had the Marimaro no Mi. He was, in a way, inheriting Ace's role, so that was really cool. And again, the main thing was Doflamingo. Doflamingo, as a character, I've made a video on him before as far as like why I think he's great, but he's maniacal, he's evil, he's terrible, he's adorable at times, adorably evil. It's a weird thing to say, but Doflamingo as an antagonist, I think he presented various issues for Luffy and Law, because Law, of course, his personal issues were embedded into that, because we also got Law's backstory in his flashback with Corazon and Doflamingo's connection to him, because that was Dofi's brother whom he killed in cold blood. But was he really wrong about that? Maybe that's a video I make, next week or something, about Doflamingo and him killing his brother. It added to his character. It added to Law's disdain for Doflamingo. But in a way, that arc brought you to understand not only Doflamingo more as a character, Law more as a character. It established bonds as well. Not only the Law and Luffy alliance, but also the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Now Luffy had other allies he could depend on if he was in a time of need and he needed a great military force. And this was the first step to Luffy becoming the 5th Yonko. What Big News wanted to say. What the hell? You understand what I'm saying. With all those things culminated, Dressrosa was my number 3 favorite arc post-Timeskip. Number 2 for me, we have Zou. Now Zou, I think the length of Zou and what it encapsulated in that arc made it. The fact that it wasn't long again, it had a bunch of important things that it covered throughout the arc. Probably a top 10 One Piece moment in that arc. People argue top 5. An introduction to a civilization, giving us more of a Yonko's crew. Information towards the end game of One Piece in general. It made Zou an arc in which it felt refreshing. So first off, we get to Zou and we understand that Jack had come through Zou, basically took the limbs of Inarashi Nekomamushi for Raizo. Then by the end of it, we realized that they sacrificed all this, their country essentially, for Raizo because of Raizo's connection to the Kozuki clan. Of course, now in Wano, it's even deeper, because finding out more about the Scabbards and their connection to Kozuki Oden, you understand why that was not even a question for the Minks. The endgame stuff with Raftel, finding out about the road poneglyphs and how that's important, who has the red poneglyphs, the voice of all things that we saw from Momonosuke and from Luffy, building that connection between the Mink, Samurai, Straw Hat, Heart Pirate Alliance, everything in that arc. It was an easy transition. It felt like all these things Oda was giving us in the Zou arc was going to make for an amazing Wano. And so far, the things from Zou, it has translated to Wano being a good arc. I just think everything hasn't been fleshed out yet, so it's, again, premature to judge Wano. However, I really enjoyed that arc. Again, reading week to week, it impacts how you view things and how you enjoy things. But that arc was just so seamless in regards to enjoyment. Definitely my number 2 arc post-Timeskip. Now, number 1, you guys should know exactly what it is. And some people don't view this as an arc because it was so short. But guys, do you view Logtown as an arc? Because Logtown is pretty short as well. But this arc was seemingly longer than Logtown. I'm talking about Reverie. Now, the Reverie arc, I think, had some of the most compelling things ever in One Piece from the start. The fact that all of the country's kings and nobles, they were coming together for a sit down to talk about certain things. And again, the characters present to essentially create not only a schism, but a lot of tension with King Cobra, King Riku, Dalton. They were coming to not only as representatives of the Straw Hats, but King Cobra personally, or him more importantly, coming to discuss poneglyphs. Fujitora as well with his agenda to abolish the warlord system with King Riku and King Cobra and how they've experienced the warlords. Nothing but greatness could come from it. But we got even more than that. We expected for Dragon to do something at the Reverie to basically declare war. It didn't happen, but we got something I think that can measure up. Sabo was at the Reverie with Morley, Lindbergh, Karasu. They were there to save Kuma. We saw Kuma, he is essentially a slave now. We saw Bonnie, she was there. But the Reverie even touched on endgame things, or things that predates One Piece. God's Valley. Of course, it wasn't mentioned at the Reverie, but we got information on the Rocks pirates from Garp, knowing that he was the one responsible for taking them down, and that was the way he got his name, Garp the Hero. We may have gotten the final villain in One Piece, Imu-sama. And knowing that Im-sama is the sole person in control of the world government and that the Gorosei were bowing and basically Im-sama is their boss, it changed our whole perspective on One Piece and what we initially knew. Of course, there were people that figured that there could be somebody above the Gorosei, somebody that they were listening to. Well, my personal thing that I said a lot, years ago, was that there were going to be celestial dragons of a higher tier. I thought it would be a group of them. Well, the Gorosei, they're viewed as celestial dragons, but I thought there would be an inner circle of strong celestial dragons, but essentially it's just one person that they have ruling at the top. And now Im-sama going and looking at that huge straw hat, the whole idea or the thought of a cleansing that's supposed to happen and then imply that it's happened before. It was endgame stuff. There was no way you could not have enjoyed the Reverie. That's why I think no matter what One Piece fan I talk to, they absolutely love what the Reverie presented. And then even throwing Shanks into the mix. Why was Shanks meeting with the Reverie saying that there was someone that the world government should look out for? I mean, people were speculating it could be Blackbeard, but they know about Blackbeard. There's no way they didn't know about Blackbeard. Who is this person that Shanks was talking about? I mean, it kicked off with Luffy having a 1.5 billion berry bounty, information about Kobe. We got to see all our favorite princesses again. There's no question in my mind. I think objectively, the Reverie is the best One Piece arc post-time skip, and personally my favorite because it answered a lot of the questions that I had in regards to a lot of different things. So of course it presented more questions as well with the Shanks and Im-sama, all that stuff, but it was fantastic. And for me, that is my #1 arc post-time skip in One Piece. But guys, that's pretty much it. Leave your thoughts below. What are your personal 5 greatest arcs in One Piece, or 5 favorite arcs in One Piece? You can list it as objectively as you want to, or you can just list your favorites. You know, it doesn't matter. I just want to know your favorite arcs. Leave those below. Give me your thoughts as well. What do you think about my reasonings for my favorite arcs in One Piece post time skip? Be sure to like the video as well because that definitely helps. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this because it's a lot more to come. Trust me. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.Ace. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. I enjoy interacting with you guys on Twitter and on Instagram as well. That's probably the best place to DM me. But on Twitter, we can interact. It's a lot of things going back and forth. But yeah. Thank you guys so much for your support. Shout out to all my patrons. You guys support me. Of course, if you're watching this video, it's support, but for my Patreon members and just supporting in different ways, thank you guys so much. I do appreciate it. But again, leave your thoughts, like, subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.